Hi, I'm Mark Lassoff from Framework Television. Welcome to the channel. We've got a really exciting video for you today. We're going to create a website from scratch. We're actually going to create our website in 4 separate stages today. First, we're going to design the prototype using Figma, an online design tool. Next, we'll write the HTML code to create the basic scaffolding for our site. Once we have the HTML done, we'll write the CSS code, cascading style sheet code, so it'll look exactly like our prototype. Finally, we'll write some JavaScript to create interactivity in our site. We're actually going to create an interactive photo gallery. So let's get started with the design using Figma. If you want to follow along, Figma's available at figma.com. It's free, and I think you'll enjoy using it. Let's get going. If you're going to build a prototype, you first have to have the materials you're going to use for your website together. So I've got a folder full of the photos that I want to use right here. And I've got the text already created for the website. This particular website is going to be an advertisement for a real estate listing in Chicago, Illinois. A 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment on sale for $115,000. So I have the address, I have the 1-bedroom, 1-bath info, the price, a text description, and my photos. To create the prototype itself, I use Figma. Figma is a free prototyping program designed for digital. It's more lightweight than perhaps Photoshop or Illustrator and really is geared towards digital design or designing websites, mobile apps, online elements. So let's go ahead and create our prototype. I'm actually going to speed up the process here, so you'll see this happen very, very fast, but you'll get the idea of what I'm doing. Before we speed things up, let's go ahead and actually create our frame. Figma features a number of different size frames you can design for a phone, a tablet, a desktop. I recommend starting small and then getting bigger, so you might actually design what your site looks like on a phone, what it looks like on a tablet, what it looks like on a desktop. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to do the desktop design. So I'm going to use the 1280 by 720 iMac frame, and I'm going to get started creating my design. Okay, I think we have our design done. We've incorporated most of the elements here. So the next step is going to be writing the HTML code for our actual design. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the Framework Television channel, and hit the little bell so you're alerted to our new videos. We come out with new videos regularly for people who are learning digital design and coding. Okay, so now that we've created our prototype using Figma, it's time to start writing code. The first code we're going to write is the HTML, the hypertext markup language, and we're going to use that to place every element that's in our site onto the page. We're going to place our photos, the text, and all the other elements that are part of this website using HTML. Let's get started. I've arranged the screen so I can see the prototype design and I can see my photos. And I've also got my text editor open on the left-hand side of the screen. The text editor I'm using is called Brackets. It's available for free if you want to follow along at brackets.io. You can download it. It's available for Mac, PC, even Linux, I think. And it's a free program that just allows you to enter code into a file. And the reason you don't use a word processor is a word processor might leave formatting marks inside the file. We don't want that. We want the plain text. So a text editor like Brackets does the job. I've already started the coding here, and what you see is called the basic document structure. This is the structure underneath every HTML document. So we've got our doc type declaration, which should be doc type HTML. This simply declares that this is an HTML5 document. And then the HTML itself is a series of pairs of tags known as elements. So on line 2, we have an opening HTML tag. On line 9, we have a closing HTML tag. The opening and closing tag and everything inside is known as an element. We have our head tag and our title tag or title element, whichever you prefer. Let's change the title here to the address of our listing, 4880 North Marine. What we're going to do in the HTML is separate our content into different content areas that we'll then mark up. I see 3 content areas here. Our header, our images, and our what we'll call our information area. So I'm going to create what are called logical divisions to hold those. Logical divisions are just divisions of the page. So first I'm going to create one logical division to be the container. Everything is held inside the container. Consider that the whole page. Then, as I mentioned, we're going to have a couple of more divisions. We're going to have a header section, which is where our address is. We're going to have a photos section. And of course, inside of these div elements, which you see are just opened and closed, we're going to put the actual content. Something I like to do is put next to the closing div tags what div we're closing. It avoids confusion later when our page gets long. So without regard to how things are laid out, I'm now going to put in the information that's on my page. So we'll put this as a heading 1, 4880 North Marine Drive, apartment 513. I could easily just copy it out of my prototype if I wanted to. That's all that's in the header. This orange bar, that's part of the presentation, and we'll take care of that in CSS. I'll do the information section next and leave the photos for last. So we have our second heading here with Chicago, Illinois, and the zip code. And we have our third line with the bedroom, bathrooms, and price. Let's see if I can grab just that. Probably would have been easier to type it. And then we've got this long narrative here that's got the information about the apartment listing. I'm going to put that in a P or paragraph tag. So far we've used our logical divisions. We've used our heading 1 tag for the most important heading on the page, H2 for secondary tags, and then paragraph for the paragraph that goes right here. All right, so now let's go ahead and put our photos in, again, without regard to how they're laid out. And since the photos are kind of divided into 2 different sections, right, we have the section for the main photo and then a section for our secondary photos. I'm going to divide this again into a main photo div and a secondary photo div. Just like that. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and label the closing div so I know what it's closing. So inside the main photo div, we've got simply this image here, which is exterior 2. Right? That's the image. So I'm going to use an image tag. Image source equals images slash exterior 2. Notice the help, by the way, that I'm getting from the editor here, from my brackets editor. It's giving me hints and showing me file paths. And inside the image tag, I always put an alt attribute here with a description of the photo. And that's for accessibility. So that's all in the main photo. Then we have our secondary photo area. There's 6 photos in there. So we're going to create 6 image tags. First one is bedroom. And then probably should go in this order. So bedroom and then kitchen 2. All right. So image source equals images bedroom. I'm going to make very short alt attributes here. You probably should be more descriptive. So there we've got our bedroom photo. And the next one is, we said kitchen 2, right there. Kitchen 2. And then we have 4 more. And that's view 1, I can see right here. So view, images, view. Let's not forget my alt attributes. View from apartment. I like this apartment for only $115,000. Much more expensive where I live. Kitchen. Okay. And let's finish this up. We've got then the restroom. Sometimes coding HTML can be kind of repetitive, but it is important to do it correctly because, as I mentioned, this is the scaffolding for your entire site. So you want to make sure this is correct. Okay, that's exterior 3 and living room 3. And you want to also use the help that's available to you here. It's not exterior 3, that's exterior. That's just plain old exterior. You want to use the help that's available to you here in the environment because it's going to prevent you from making errors as you code your HTML. All right, and just one last photo, and then I think we've got everything. And that last photo is living room 3, okay? So again, use the image tag. Show where that image tag is located using the source attribute. Select the correct photo. And I think we have all of the content that's going to be part of our page. Let's go ahead and check it in the browser. And you might end up being a little bit disappointed here in what this looks like, because it's probably not what you expect. It's nothing like our prototype, right? All the content is here, but as far as how it actually looks, well, not much. And that's because we haven't coded the CSS yet. We'll do that next. But there are our photos. They look nice. There is our description section. So we have all three divs. We just don't have them designed to look like our prototype yet. But our HTML allowed us to get all of the content into our web document. Okay, so the HTML is coded. It's time to move on to the CSS, Cascading Style Sheet language. As I mentioned, the site doesn't look like our prototype yet, and that's exactly what CSS is for. CSS is the language of design on the web. So we're going to use the CSS code to create the layout, colors, and typography that we created in the prototype. Ready? Let's get started. Before I start coding the CSS, I want to do a couple of things. First, I've brought in this reset CSS, and what this does is essentially resets all of the default settings to 0. So this way, any choices I make are based on no settings whatsoever, instead of the settings that exist in the web browser by default. So let's link to this here in the head section of my document. Link href equals reset CSS rel equals style sheet. So that's going to take all the default settings and essentially reset them. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but this will look a little different. Notice here, now that I've applied the reset style sheet, there's no styling till our header 1. Images look the same, and text is just kind of smashed in there. So now we'll go ahead and create all of the default settings. So let's create a styles page, and I'll save this, since this listing is in Chicago, as chicago.css. And this is where we'll create our CSS, but I've got a link to it from our HTML as well. So first the reset CSS, and then our CSS. Chicago.css rel equals style sheet. Okay, great. So now any style I put in here will be displayed in the website itself. Let's first take care of the fonts. So the font that I'm using, this is closest to what I used in the mockup. What I used in the mockup is called Rockwell. I can't depend on the user having Rockwell, so I'm going to use a Google font that's close called Cameron. So let's bring in our Cameron font. Select this font. And the way Google Fonts works, it'll give me the code to put in here. So first it gives me a style sheet, and then whenever I want to use it, I'll put this in the CSS. So since this is going to be the only font we use, I can actually put this in the container, which is the parent for all of our elements. And as soon as I do that, notice now that I've reset or refreshed, we're now displaying that font. So we've got our reset CSS, we've got our own CSS, and now my job is to style this so it looks like our prototype. So we start with an orange rectangle, and I can tell from here it is, the orange rectangle is 60 pixels high. So let's create that by matching the header tag with 100%, height 60 pixels, and the background color here is this orange. That's the color, so I'm going to set background color to the orange. And I'm constantly going to be checking to make sure what I'm doing looks correct. And so far, so good. The size of the type, it's bold, and it's size 40. So in there, we'll set the font size to 40 pixels, or excuse me, 40, I think it's 40. I'm guessing it's 40 points. We may have to change that. And we'll center align it, and we'll make it bold. And all these different CSS rules are just rules that I've learned over the years. You can easily just look these up. That looks sort of right. We're using a slightly different font, remember, so that's pretty good though. So this is looking correct. So now I'll continue with the process of styling the other elements that are part of my document. I'll speed this up, and you can watch as I make progress on creating the CSS for this particular design. So after some effort in screwing up the Flexbox part of the CSS, which controls the layout a few times, I think I got this looking more or less like I want it to, kind of like it does here in the prototype. Spacing's a little bit off, but we could make minor adjustments all day long. We've got the basic layout here exactly as we want. Can still make some adjustments. For example, here in the main, I'm just gonna take that, or here in the info rather, add a little more space between the 1 bedroom, 1 bath and the narrative. So again, we continue to make minor adjustments so we get this looking exactly as we want. The other thing to deal with here is the fact that when we get to a certain size, our layout breaks. It doesn't work anymore. So we're going to want to use within CSS what are called responsive design techniques in order to make sure that this looks good across different size screens. So I'm just going to add a single breakpoint and make sure that when this gets to a certain size that the layout is adjusted for that size. So again, I'm going to speed up the video and take care of that last little bit of CSS. Okay, so here you see I've got some basic responsive design. As we get to smaller screens, the layout adjusts to fit better in that individual screen. So now the CSS portion of our page is done, and we'll move on to the interactivity with JavaScript. Okay, so now it's time to add the interactivity. And we're going to do that using JavaScript. JavaScript is the programming language that runs within web browsers. It's probably the most popular language in the world and probably the most important one for you to learn right now. So we're going to create a little interactivity in our photo gallery using JavaScript. Let's get started. Okay, now for some JavaScript. And what I want to do is be able to display any of these smaller photos in the main photo space. So what we'll have to do is write JavaScript that detects an event like pointing at these photos and then places that photo inside of the actual space for the main photo. So we'll start by creating a JavaScript file. I'll call this chicago.js. And then in the HTML, we'll bring this in at the bottom of the body to make sure all of the other elements have loaded first. So there's chicago.js. And that's all we need to do to bring in our script. So we're going to want to bring into the JavaScript any of the elements we're going to be using. So we're going to be using this main space. It's got the class image main. I'm actually going to add the ID image main, because this way I can use the JavaScript get element by ID command to bring it in. So let's call it main. So now in JavaScript, whenever we're referring to main, we're referring to this element. So I could, for example, here set main, and we could add an event listener for a click. And every time we clicked on it, we could put out an alert box that says hello. It's kind of how this works. So let's refresh. Hello. Hello. And that's because we added onto that main an event listener listening for a click that runs this function. So that's how it works. So now I'm going to speed it up again. I'm going to add the necessary JavaScript to get our actual code working so we can display the secondary photos in the main photo space. Okay, and there you can see a little bit of JavaScript added, and this works just like you'd expect. The problem is, though, if you look here, now we can't get the main photo back because it's not part of the array. So now that I'm noticing that, I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of adjustments to the code so we can get the original main photo back. The way I'm going to do that is this will be a mouse over function. So when the user mouses over any of those photos, it switches out. But we'll also add a mouse out function here. And that'll place back the original photo. So mouse out. And when the mouse leaves the photo, we'll simply put the original image source back, which I'll get here in the HTML. So the original source is images/exterior2, just like that. All right, let's refresh and check it. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted. All right, so the JavaScript is the last of the technologies I'm using to build our website from scratch. Hey, thanks for watching once again. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the Framework Television channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Mark Lassoff. We'll see you next time.